Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michelle Easton, president of the Clare, Boothe, Luce Center for Conservative Women, and I want to welcome you all to our November Conservative Women's Network. This is a monthly event we started 23 years ago to bring in area women. We always tape it so that we have a lot of people who watch it on our YouTube channel as well. But it's a wonderful opportunity to hear from experts and network with each other. Today I'm pleased to introduce Kim Luckabaugh, who's going to discuss recognizing and responding to human trafficking in our communities. You know, human trafficking happens in our own communities more than some of us realize. As Executive Director of Reset180, Kim works to help these victims out of human trafficking. The mission of Reset180 is to prevent human trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, to disrupt the related networks, and restore those who are impacted. Kim's been the executive director since May of 2022. She heard about the organization's work to help victims of trafficking during a Reston Bible Church Women's Conference and felt led to be the leader. Kim was previously a senior program manager at Volunteer Fairfax, where she managed a number of programs, including emergency response, Volunteers for Change, alternative community service, Just for Youth, and more volunteer programs. She also served as a leader in the area coordinator with American Heritage Girls, a faith-based scout-type character development program for girls 5 to 18 years old. September of last year, Governor Glenn Youngkin appointed her to serve on the Governor's Advisory Board for Service and Volunteerism. She's also freelanced as a journalist for local Northern Virginia publications. So many things here. The restaurant marketing director for Fairfax Circle's Chick-fil-A. Yes, they close on Sunday. Director of Customer Care and Marketing at William T. Clothiers. She received her BA in English and Communications at Everett University, a private Baptist college in Danville, Virginia, and she serves on the university's Alumni Association as a board member. She's lived in Virginia her whole life, first in Loudoun County, and then she moved here to Fairfax with her husband. They have 3 children, all in college, and in her spare time, she loves to read historical fiction, visit historical sites, and spend time with her friends and family. Now, following today's talk, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A, we have some lunch outside. We invite you all to join us. So please join me now in welcoming Kim Luckabaugh.
All right, thank you all so much. It's such a blessing and honor to be with you all today to share about a subject that is it's a difficult one to have a conversation about. It's kind of overwhelming at times, but at the same time, we find ways to find hope. And so while I'm going to share some difficult stuff with you today, I'm going to leave it on the hope note at the end of it, just so that we don't want you leaving feeling overwhelmed by the issue, but to recognize that there is a place where we all can make the difference to make this better. So I appreciate your gracious introduction, Michelle. It's such a privilege to be with you all. And I just really admire the work that is being done here and just the difference that you all make in the lives of the young ladies in our communities and giving them those opportunities to serve and lead and grow. Such an important ability to be able to give them because they're our next leaders and we really rely on them. So thank you for doing that. So I appreciate the introduction. I am a local to the area, Loudoun County, Ashburn, where it was just dirt roads. And then coming down into Fairfax and raising my family here, I've always been the mom, the family member, and always centered on my community. And so growing up, this was not something that I conceptualized. And through my times with American Heritage Girls, a mom in a troop came up to me about 10 years ago and said, Kim, you need to be aware of this issue. And I looked at him like, what are you talking about? And very naive. But that is so often the response that many of us have is like, what do you mean there's trafficking here? And it's something that we come across on almost a daily basis. We don't even recognize it and know it's happening right in our own plain sight. So that was a very enlightening to me to learn about this. I was at a women's conference at Rest and Bible where Kelly Minter had some tables set up, and then Nova HDI, Northern Virginia Human Trafficking, had that table. I'm like, wow, what's going on with this? I want to learn more. And through my time at Volunteer Fairfax, I would have women coming to me needing community service hours for operating a body place, which means a brothel or one of the illicit massage parlors. And I didn't know what was going on right in my own line of sight there. So during COVID, I got more of those requests for community service, and I reached out to a colleague at another organization, and I said, hey, is this a victim of human trafficking? And his response to me was, Kim, I never thought they would come through you. And it was eye-opening to me. It's like, what do you mean they're coming through me? How come the police didn't identify this? How come the courts didn't identify? How come it's somebody helping administer community service that is identifying this? And that was just so grievous to me that we're not doing enough to make our communities aware what this issue is and what it isn't, and what its presence actually looks like. So I'd like to spend some time identifying what this is, identifying who the traffickers are, how they operate, being aware of what these indicators are, and how we respond to it. So first off, let's talk about what actually is human trafficking. So let me give you the federal definition of this, and I'm actually going to read this because I don't want to mess it up. So this is when a person is induced to provide forced labor or commercialized sex through force, fraud, or coercion. If the person is under 18, those last three things do not have to be proven. They're automatically considered a victim of trafficking. And this is when sex is exchanged for something of value and not just money. So they could be exchanging it for other services or other goods. It could be pretty much anything, even just some of those relationships. So, and this is the fastest growing, second largest criminal enterprise behind drug trafficking. And because there is so much value in selling a person, unfortunately. So when we talk about force, we're talking about all manners of physical and sexual assault, anything that could be violent or aggressive, even physical or emotional isolation. When we talk about fraud, these are the false promises that are provided to someone to entice them and manipulate them into this field. And then we talk about coercion, and this is where some of those threats are happening, the coercive threats of, oh, it'd be a shame if anything happened to your brother who's playing in the side yard. I know where he plays soccer. And so things like that, they will scope out and identify who they're targeting. We're going to get more into that in a little bit. And then they use that to manipulate and coerce that person. And they'll even do their own other versions of emotional coercion with them. So where do we find human trafficking? Let me take you to a heat map. This is put up from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And I don't have a lot of slides for you all today, but this is an important one because you guys are smart. You can discern where Northern Virginia is. And it's hard to see, but it's under a real deep section of red. And that is where we're seeing more intensity of human trafficking. You notice it's all up and down the western seaboard of Florida, and the eastern side of it, up in the Great Lakes area, up and down the 95 corridor, LA, Sacramento, San Francisco, the Portland and Seattle areas. This moves up and down major arteries where you have like the interstate commerce, where you have major seaports, major international airports, wherever you have the ability to quickly and easily move people. And that is the common denominator there. Why do they do this? Because there's a lot of money in this. This is a $150 billion a year industry. So there's a lot of money to be made in selling a person, unfortunately. In Northern Virginia, we had the fourth highest number of trafficking cases filed in the country in 2022. So we are very, very actively involved in this illicit activity. So just in gleaning some information from the trafficking hotline, we know that last year they had about just over 16,000 identified reported cases of human trafficking. Unfortunately, so much is underreported that that's just a drop in the bucket of what we know it really is. When you look at international numbers, just globally, and include labor trafficking, a lot of what I'll talk about is sex trafficking, but even when you look at labor trafficking, there could be around 50 million victims worldwide. And about half of those, a little bit over half, are labor trafficking victims of all ages. So, who are these individuals? Well, if you go to label a trafficker, you're going to miss them because they fit so many different demographics, socioeconomically, and even gender, race, ethnicity, the whole nine yards. If you try to fix that label, you're not going to identify the person. They may look like monsters, or you may think that they look like monsters, but they're really not. These are actual mugshots of individuals just in Northern Virginia who have been convicted of sex trafficking. If you'll notice, they don't really look like monsters. They look like people that could be in the grocery store with you or in your neighborhoods, walking a dog at night or something. This individual right here, just to identify this one, this is Michael Maines, and he was convicted in Nova in 2016 for sex trafficking at least 55 girls and women and wrote a book on how to pick up women. And he described the importance of dressing nicely, wearing expensive jewelry, to looking like you've got it all together because he wanted the girls to come to him thinking, hey, he's a good guy. And so he's now serving 35 years in prison for the trafficking of the women. So these are all individuals who've been caught. And that's just one of the many stories. So how does this start? It always starts with grooming and recruiting. The grooming part is so important because they have to entice the person to trust them. This is not something that happens like where it's just someone out in the street doing a quick snatch and grab. This is based on relationship development and where they want someone to trust them, because if they trust them, then that person will be more likely to be a more willful participant in some of the earlier stages of trafficking. So they gain the person's trust and they gather information from it. Then they use that information that they gather to help exploit that person more and to trap that person more. And that's how they manipulate the victim. And there are many things that make a victim vulnerable. So we're going to talk about some of these vulnerabilities. They are usually under 18. And this is not in all cases, but just in many. They look for someone with low self-esteem. They may have mental health concerns. Children with autism are also very susceptible to being trafficked. People struggling with depression. People in the LGBTQ communities, and people dealing with the gender dysphoria. All that's another vulnerability. Recent immigrants are very vulnerable to being trafficked. If there are any health issues that makes them more susceptible to being deceived, family members can also groom and traffic them for profit. Heavy social media usage, where we have our youth and young people in chat rooms. People are going to go into the chat rooms and start pretending to be someone they're not and developing those relationships and kind of lower the boom on them that way. Another thing that we see is the results of a hypersexualized culture. And we hear so much about this in terms of our schools and what's happening to our children. But this is really important because children hear and our youth hear so much about sex in their daily lives that they see it on their social media. They see it. They hear about it at school. It's just plastered everywhere they turn, that they don't know how to discern good from bad. So when someone approaches them, they don't know how to respond. They like, well, this is something I hear all the time. What's so different about this? So they don't know how to determine if this is safe or not. So that's where we talk about the hypersexualization of the culture, making our youth more vulnerable to being trafficked. So I'm going to go over several different types of trafficking that we see in this area. And also, I'll try to remember to bring in some current information that's coming out in the news today about a sex trafficking ring that was just busted yesterday in Massachusetts and here in Northern Virginia. But that falls under the illicit massage business stuff. And so if I skip it, remind me. So there are 4 types of human trafficking that we typically see in Northern Virginia. We have pimp-controlled trafficking. We have gang-controlled trafficking. We have the labor and IMB, illicit massage business trafficking. And I usually say this one for last because it grieves me the most, is familial trafficking. And that's, I'm going to go into all these right now. So we know what a pimp is. We've all seen Pretty Woman, but it's not pretty at all. And it's something that exploits women. Some people think that it empowers women, and instead it subjugates women. So this is not a healthy thing at all. This is something that can turn violent, they can't get out of, and it's something that will turn their life upside down and turn into things that they never considered. This is where, and a pimp can be either male or female. It doesn't have to be just a guy. We find that they're scheduling commercial sex acts for, we know, the financial benefit, and they lure and keep their victims by presenting a family unit. And you'll often hear the girls refer to the pimp as a daddy, or new language as uncle. So we see that whole family structure where they try to keep them insulated and more to themselves, so they don't reach out and become part of another community and going back to their own homes. There are 3 ways that we do see this work out. I'm sorry, this is starting to fall around there. We see a gorilla pimp, we see a Romeo pimp, and we see a CEO pimp. There's 3 kinds. And so a gorilla is one who's going to use violent actions to keep that individual in control, under their thumb. And they will kind of go back and forth between being a Romeo and a gorilla at times. And a Romeo is a guy that's going to portray himself as a boyfriend. And they start off with promising the soon-to-be victim that whole idyllic dream of the 2.5 kids, the yard with the white picket fence, and the happy life. We love each other. We're going to be together forever. This is going to be wonderful. And as he starts enticing her in, no, they're not going to get married, but he promises that. And as he's roping her into this, he starts dropping these little hints. Hey, I've got this deal I'm trying to make, and I really need your help. Just this one time. I just need you to go be with this guy this one time. I promise it's just once. And after she caves to that pressure, then she becomes part of what they call the stable. And she's just another girl. And she realizes she's been trapped. And now there's so much shame and guilt that you're worthless. No one's going to want you. And you're just better off here. So that Romeo will then shift to gorilla at times to keep her in line. And if she gets out of line, he has a person called the bottom girl, and that's like another recruiter woman in that stable that will keep her in line. So he may not lay a hand on her, but the bottom girl will. And that's where some of the other coercion and physical abuse will come in. The CEO pimp is one who just sees this as an enterprise. This is just business. It's just the way I work. Don't mess with me. He can turn into a gorilla, but this is just his business opportunity. In gangs, we have over 100 gangs in Northern Virginia, and sex trafficking is part and parcel with any gang activity. If you've got a gang, I don't care how big or small they are, you have sex trafficking. If you have a gang in a school, you have sex trafficking in that school. I mean, it's non-negotiable. It is a fact. And we know that it does exist in our schools in Northern Virginia. So they target typically girls from 11 to 15 years old with a promise of protection. We're going to be, again, that family thing again. They're going to start pulling that out. We're here to protect you. We're all going to be in this together. The initiation is a massive gang rape. And then she's stuck in with this group. If she tries to get out, they're going to threaten her family. We've heard of a case, Susan Young up in McLean has spoken widely about this, how it impacted her family. And it was a gang that trafficked her daughter, threatened her younger daughter, threatened her sons, threatened to kill her and her husband just to keep the daughter in line. She is now out of that and she's safe, but that's a lifetime of trauma that she has to recover from. So another thing I can tell you about, pardon me, some of the examples of this. So there was a Ulysses Amaya who targeted young girls from low-income areas with a promise that he would give a portion of his earnings back to them. And he and his co-conspirators used the allure of protection to entice them to stay there. And they used drugs to manipulate the girls. And at the time of the arrest, he was actively trafficking 5 girls. The victims were physically threatened and would be punished by force to have sex with multiple gang members in rapid succession. And during the trial, one victim testified to a physical beating when she tried to leave and was used as a lesson to others. And he is now serving a 50-year prison sentence. So they do get caught, not as often as we would like, but they do get caught. Familial trafficking is, in my opinion, the hardest one to wrap my head around. It's also the hardest to identify. And it's very underreported. A lot of times these are children. They don't recognize that they're victims. They just know that something is happening. They don't know why. Some of them are growing up in a familial situation where it's a family business. So it may not just be one parent, it may be a whole line of this happening in their family, and they're just the next one in line to have it happen to them. And since it happens at a young age, it becomes very normalized for them. We have a Reset 180 board member who is a survivor of familial trafficking, and she's described it as she went to school one day, normal, happy child, and when she came home, that's when the trafficking began, just any old day. And when she went back to school, she was a different child, but no one stopped to ask her what happened. What happened between a Friday and a Monday? And she was labeled that problem child and moved out of this class or that class and suspended and always in trouble, but she was the problem child. No one ever stopped to say what happened, what occurred. And the former police detective, Bill Wolf, would talk about this, and he was very instrumental in the Young's case in rescuing their daughter, recovering their daughter. And when he finally got to the daughter to say, what's been going on? Well, how long has this been happening? What is happening? Are you okay? And she told him what happened. And he's like, why haven't you told anyone? You've been in the office all these times. You've been with your counselor all these times. She said, nobody asked. So it goes right back, which is why he called his original organization Just Ask, because you need to ask. When you see something, you ask, are you okay? What's going on? What's changed? And in Barbara Jean's life, that would have made such a big difference. When she went to her mother to say, why is this happening? Her mother shushed her and said, don't tell anyone. That's how the rent is being paid. So they would use it for just living expenses, for drugs, any of that. So it's just a matter of understanding how to identify the issue and respond in turn. Labor trafficking and IMBs are another form of trafficking we see in Northern Virginia. The labor piece is where traffickers are going to use threats of violence and lies and debt bondage to keep that person held hostage under their sphere of influence. We see that when you go to a 7-Eleven, you see a bunch of day laborers standing outside. It's very prominent in you can find it in construction, you'll find it in hospitality, you'll find it in agriculture, all these kind of different industries that use that hourly day labor kind of stuff. They make false promises of a high-paying job, and next thing you know, the person realizes it isn't what I was promised at all, and now they're trapped and they can't get out. The illicit massage businesses are connected to this. And these are registered businesses that operate under the guise of being a legitimate massage business, only they aren't. They will say they're legitimate massage, and they're not. And we know how to identify them. We are able to do some research to identify what the places are, but they operate in violation of state and federal laws, and that may include criminal statutes regarding human trafficking, debt bondage, organized criminal activities such as money laundering, visa and immigration fraud, smuggling, and or tax evasion. And that term, illicit massage business, does not encompass the legitimate therapeutic massage business industry. And quite honestly, the legitimate massage business industry is very unhappy with these places because it casts a pall over them and their business. That's why when we do some of our outreach, we are very careful to make sure we research where we do go, because we don't want to accidentally target a legitimate business. According to, I want to see if I got that. Yeah. According to Polaris, which is the Human Trafficking Hotline and the network, there are approximately 13 to 16,000 IMBs in the United States at any given time, and they are in every single state. The network provided this for us, and this is a current estimate of the number of IMBs in Virginia. There are 414. I can tell you there are over 125 just in Fairfax County alone. They are next to your dentist offices or next to your dry cleaners. They can be any place that you're doing every daily business. They are within kind of a stone's throw of schools. I can tell you one in Fairfax City is right next to the Goddard School, right on Fairfax Boulevard. Right in front of my neighborhood. And so parents are dropping their kids off for educational support and schooling, and there is an IMB within probably about 15, 20 yards. So they don't care where they're going, and they're exploiting women in there. It is a $25 million industry just in Fairfax County alone. We know that when you have an IMB, you have approximately 2 to 4 victims in each one. And there is an organized criminal structure within each one of these places. The money that comes in is laundered through other entities. And if the business is west of the Mississippi, the money goes through Monterey Park in LA. And that's where the people come and go through is LAX. If it's on the eastern, our side of the Mississippi, it's all coming through Flushings. And so that's why you see, let me go back to that slide. That's why you see that hotbed of activity going up and down the I-95 corridor. It goes down into Richmond. Hampton Roads is a huge hotbed of it too. When you get down into the Atlanta area around that I-85 corridor, wherever you have that. So I said those interstates, it's easy to move people around, and these individuals do not stay at any one place for very long. There are certain traits that indicate a location that's being used for human trafficking in an illicit massage business. There are things that we just generally look for. We look for places that are kind of in some of the lower rent areas oftentimes. We look for windows that are covered with stock photos, which is illegal, by the way. We look for places that just have that typical red and blue blinking open sign in the window and it just says like LX massage or something like that. Or it may say Asian garden massage, something that sounds so exotic and relaxing. Those are some of the things we typically look for. They have security cameras outside of the business, usually about 2 outside. You open the door, there's another solid wall with a door, and there's a doorbell there and another camera in the lobby when you walk in. They're keeping notes of who their customers are and who other entities are who are walking in. So they're keeping a very close bead on things. They're also keeping a close eye on the women who are working there. The woman at the front desk was oftentimes one of the girls that was originally brought in and trafficked, but she has now worked her way up. She's called the Mama San, and she's in charge. She's that business manager of that location. And now she is actually a trafficker. She has really stepped above the line. It's not like the bottom girl when it comes to the pimp control thing. There's actually a lot of sympathy still for that woman because she still is being trafficked. But when it comes to the illicit massage business, this woman is now full-fledged trafficker, and she has totally jumped over that line there. You will see that the women go in. They rarely leave the location. They may be living there. You may, if you're able to get into the back, which you won't be able to do, but if you were, you would probably find lingerie hanging to dry. They've washed it. You will find potentially a rice pot on the back step. That if they do come and go, they're coming through a back door. They're escorted by males. Oftentimes, they're open late at night to like 10 o'clock at night. So that's another hallmark that we look for. And they have strictly male clientele. If you or I were to call to make an appointment, we would be told they were busy, or if they were actually being upright with you, they would tell you men only. So what do we look for when we talk about these victims? How do we recognize a victim in front of us? Oh, let me back up. I told you I was going to talk about the IMB thing. So there was news last night that just came out that there was a bust in Massachusetts, I believe Camden, Massachusetts, and in Tysons, Virginia, and down in Merrifield, Virginia. And they're looking at this as a big sex ring that they busted up. But this was for a high-level clientele. When I read about half of the affidavit last night, or about a third of it. And what I was reading in that affidavit was something that looks just like a very high-end model of an illicit massage business, where you have the ringing the doorbell, or don't even ring the doorbell, but it's very secretive. It's in a high-end apartment. And the practices that are employed are just like ones that are employed in an illicit massage business. Even the leadership structure, and there is a leadership structure in how these places are organized, so much so that it's the organized crime unit within Fairfax County Police Department that oversees and monitors this because of how the element is shaped after an organized criminal ring. And what I did see in that affidavit was all the hallmarks of what the illicit massage businesses are doing with how they structure their business, from the business manager and the person who comes in and sets everything up to the mama san. And it was actually one of the mama san was actually arrested. So when I read down into it, it was a female name, and it was basically the mama san of this operation down here. So it was huge, and they're saying that it was about $600 an hour rate. And these other massage businesses, it's a low rate, like $40 an hour, but they negotiate tips for the sexual services. So it may be $40, but you're going to pay an extra $100 depending on what sexual service you're getting her to do for you. So when you compare $600 versus $150 or $200, it's going to be given a high-end feel to it. So the victims. So let's talk about what a prostituted victim looks like. And there are several indicators to look for in that victim that's being trafficked by a pimp. This is someone who is isolated. There may be bruises. They have sexually explicit photos of them on social media. They may look fearful, anxious, paranoid. They don't trust the police. They've been told not to trust the police. And honestly, Some of their clients have been police, so they're really not going to trust law enforcement. They will likely have depression. They're going to be addicted to drugs, most likely, or alcohol. They will use very specific lingo about being in the game or in the life and things that are going to be associated with that field. They will possess multiple phones for the trafficker to reach them, for the clients to reach them, all that kind of stuff. Look for tattoos on these individuals. For these individuals and gang victims, you're going to look for things like a 5-point crown. You'll look for a branding on them that will identify who their trafficker is. It may even say property of Angel or something like that. So they will mark these women as their own personal property. The pimps also have tattoos. They're going to tell you who they are as well. It may be tattoos of money. It may be a tattoo of a gorilla with a dollar sign. They're going to tell you who they are with their markings as well. In the gangs, we see the victims are become disconnected from their friends and their families. They withdraw from family activities. They start running away, skipping school. Maybe they're staying after school, but they're not really staying after because they're being trafficked at a location close by. They become suddenly sexually active. You will see substance abuse and mental health concerns. And again, tattoos, things like Daddy's Little Girl, a 5-point crown, again, with the name affixed to it. You'll see behavioral changes. And as that person becomes more isolated, they become more irritable. They will share little information about their lives and their social interactions. You will see that they start appearing with different clothing and how they are dressing, unexplained gifts that you didn't buy for them, and all of a sudden they have this expensive jewelry or an iPad, things that you know you didn't purchase. They may start displaying gang graffiti signs, wearing specific colors affiliated with a gang, different haircuts, using hand signs. All these things are indicative of gang trafficking. When we talk about familial trafficking, those victims, again, sudden behavior changes. Their academics start tanking, their appearance changes, their interests change. They have a sudden change in behavior around previously trusted adults with that lack of trust. They may start being very comfortable around older individuals. That you start seeing them having older friends that they normally wouldn't have. Unexplained bruises and injuries are also indicative. They're not allowed to go anywhere or play with other kids. They're not allowed to go for sleepovers, more so than what a protective parent would have. This is more like neurotic in how we see it. And we will start seeing that irritability, that lashing out, and a child will suddenly start exhibiting sexual behaviors that are not normal for a child to be exhibiting. And we look for that in children who have been sexually abused. You will see that here with a victim of familial trafficking. With the IMBs, these women are Asian, almost across the board. In Fairfax County, they are nearly all Korean. But nationally, 75% are Chinese, 24% are South Korean, and then 1% are Thai. There could be other nationalities mixed in there, but that's what the network has identified as being the standard of who an IMB trafficking victim is. They often carry debt and are under extreme financial pressure, and this is how the traffickers get them here, and they will start promising them the American dream. We're going to bring you here. You can send money back to your family. Oh, now that you're here, you got to pay us back for that transportation to get you here and your room and board at 90 or 95% interest. So you have that debt bondage happening. They're never going to work their way out of that bondage. They speak little to no English. They barely have a high school education, and the traffickers will use the fear to control them, say, we're going to have you arrested or deported. And because they're from an Asian culture, we know how important honor is in that culture. Now they've dishonored their family. So the family doesn't want you back because you've dishonored us. So they feel that they're trapped here, but they're here in a country where they don't know anyone, so who do they trust? So they feel completely isolated and trapped. So whenever any kind of extrication work is done with the police or the network, it's so important to have someone who will come in who can speak their language, understand the dialect, separate them from the mama son, so that she cannot continue to coerce them and exert her force over them. So you can have that really solid conversation with them. They will rarely identify as victims due to their culture, immigration status, and language. So after sharing all this, people often say, well, why don't they just leave? Well, those are some of the reasons I just shared why they just don't leave. But there are so many other barriers that will keep someone from leaving. oftentimes they don't even recognize that they're a victim. They just know that they're being hurt, that they're trapped, but they don't realize that they're actually a victim of human trafficking. Some of these reasons and controlling methods the trafficker utilizes are captivity and confinement, and they'll use threats to increase that, threats of violence, reprisal against loved ones. I already mentioned that one. It'd be a shame if anything happened to your sister or your brother, or we're going to get your parent and kill your mom or something like that. So they also have this learned loyalty. It's almost like a Stockholm syndrome. I guess you probably would say it is that. With the IMBs in particular, those women have been really brainwashed into that I've got to show loyalty. Loyalty is so important to them culturally that they take that loyalty they would have had for their family, and now they assign it to the one who is actually trafficking them. So that makes it even more difficult to break them out of that. There may be social barriers, and that sense of shame. You cannot underestimate how strong of a barrier shame and guilt are in that person's life. They have zero self-worth at this point. They now see themselves not as a victim, but as someone who is not worthy of anyone caring and helping them. So I'm just getting what I deserve now. No one's going to want to help me. So that shame, that guilt of what they live under subjugates them even more. So that's a lot. That's a lot right there to absorb. So take a deep breath, because now we're going to get into more of a hopeful area. And so I'd like to take some time to share what Reset 180 is doing. So the first thing we do, now we feel that God has called us into this space. We are a Christian organization, and we wear that very, very proudly, because we know that apart from God strengthening us, we can't do this work. And so every day starts with prayer in our office, and we just go before him to say, cover us with the work we're doing to reach others that are being hurt and to be your hands and feet to them. It's so important to us. And that's how we respond. So one of the first things we do, the prevent part of our pillars, just what we say we do. What I'm doing right here, we have a speakers bureau that will go give a 101 presentation sharing what human trafficking is and what it looks like, how to be aware of it. We have a version for youth. We have a version for college students now. Thank you, Lauren. We have this version we give to our adult community, because if you are aware of what's going on, then you can start recognizing. And if you see it, you will be able to connect with someone who can help that person. So we just know that prevention is just the beginning of it. Second, we believe that part of fighting local trafficking is disrupting the demand. And this one is very different. It doesn't sound like it's very well understood. It just sounds like disrupting demand. What does that mean? How do you do that? So we have a couple of different ways we do that. And we know that IMBs are not just a national problem. They're very much a local problem. So what we do is we visited over 145 illicit massage businesses in Northern Virginia. And what we do is we actually disrupt the demand by talking to the guys as they're approaching. It's totally safe. We have a well-trained volunteer team to do this. And we go out in teams of 3 or more. And we start talking to the guys. We see a guy approaching an illicit massage business. And we're like, hey, can I ask you a question? And I'm not fudging. This is exactly how we do it. Can I ask you a question? And it catches them off guard because they're just trying to slide in this place real quick. And when we do that, we'll usually get them to say, yeah, what do you need? And have you been here before? How did you find this place? We'll start asking some of that stuff. And then we start explaining what's really going on. You know, the women in there can't leave. Their passports have been taken away from them. They couldn't leave if they wanted to. Oh, by the way, those passports are being used by the mama-san. I'm telling you guys this. Being used by the mama-san to actually help launder the money even more. So they're being victimized again. So we talk to the guys, make them aware of what's actually happening. Some don't care, I'll be honest. Some of them are going to leave and go to another place. But others of them, we're able to have that time to pray with them. We ask them, can I pray with you? And we share the gospel with them. We go out with churches that will help us too on this. And our goal is to turn their lives around. If we can dissuade this guy and change him from ever coming back to this place, we've disrupted the demand. That's one person less that's going to go back to these places. And so we're working on building those relationships and reaching these men to stop abusing these women. And so when we start doing the numbers, we know that there were probably close to 300,000 visits to IMBs all across Fairfax County last year. So if we're able to get the guys to stop going, even if it's one guy and he's going once a month, well, there's 12 visits that won't be happening. So it may not be a lot, but it's a dent that we're able to make. So we started that by our outreach team back in 2019, and it's the first of its kind in the country. And we're really proud to be able to do that, to make that difference in those lives. We also know that illicit massage businesses are not the only place where trafficking is occurring through the buying of sex. When we talk about the prostituted women, when we talk about the escorts, well, they're being sold online for sex by these online ads. So we subscribe to a service called Freedom Signal, and that will scrub the internet, the dark net sites of people who are being sold online for sexual services. And we can pull that data down in any kind of radius bracket we want. We choose 17 miles because that gets us into DC. And we pull that data down, and we get phone numbers of people who are being sold online. Yes, we get traffickers too, I admit that. But we'll send out a text message through this program, say, hi, I'm from Reset180, and we're trying to reach those who have been exploited by commercial sex and provide resources. Can I tell you more? And we'll get cussed out. We'll be given rates in a hotel where to meet someone, and I like getting the hotel names. That helps us know where this is happening. But every now and then, and more often than not, we're getting people saying, either my friend needs help or what does help look like? How can you help me? And that's where we're able to pour resources into that person, build relationships. If they're local still, we have teams that will go out 2 or 3 at a time to meet with this person. Hey, can we take you out for coffee? And start building those relationships. And as we do, we're helping that person identify ways they can leave that work. If they're not being held by that trafficker, then we're able to help them start dreaming, thinking of ways that they can get out. Hey, what kind of job would make you feel proud? Oh, you really love going to the gym. Let's talk about that. Let's look for places that you could apply for a job and work at the front desk in the gym. We had a woman who was texting us, and we had this conversation with her through the text messaging, and she started applying for jobs. She just needed someone to encourage her. And she texted us back a couple weeks later, hey, I got a job. And she told us where, and she was super excited. And then another 3 weeks went by, and she said, hey, I got to let you know, I was ranked number 3 on this job. And she was so proud of herself. And to be able to go back to her child, and a lot of these women do have children, to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. And she doesn't have to feel ashamed of what she's doing. So that's a difference that we're able to make. And the reason it's so important is back in 2022, within a 50-mile radius of our office in Reston, so basically where you're sitting right now, there were about 43,000 victims for the entire year in a 50-mile radius of right here who are being sold by these commercial ads. So we want to make a difference. And if we're able to get onesies and twosies, then that's someone that we're helping get out of that life. Oh, let's see. Oh, we also know there's about 300,000 across the United States on any given day. So it's number of ads, not victims. So in the end, our greatest goal is to restore the lives who have been impacted by human trafficking. And I did talk about the guys at the IMBs. We count that as a restoring a life because that's breaking a cycle and offering him resources for sexual addiction. So we really want to help turn that around. But the lives of the women matter so much to us. And by the way, it's not just women who are being trafficked, but 50% of victims are boys. So it's not just the girls that are on the receiving end of this. But we have a survivor services team that provides a wraparound case management program to provide actual support for local victims of human trafficking. We provide stipends for food and rent and utilities and car bills and just all these things that we have to pay on a daily basis. They need help with too. And then we provide all of their care for trauma-informed therapy. If they need therapy, and they all do, then we're going to pay and find a really good trauma-informed therapist, make sure they get the best that they possibly can. You can't succeed in life unless you go through healing. And we want them to go through that healing so badly. We work with them on financial literacy skills and workforce development because we want them to become self-sustainable. And they can't be self-sustainable unless they have the building blocks to accomplish that. And given the trafficking they've been through, many of them are operating on a teenage mindset. They don't know how to manage their money. They don't know how to navigate scheduling doctor appointments and schedules for a kid in school. And it's hard. And they haven't learned how to navigate that reality. So we want to help them learn how to accomplish this. The next step for us is building a house. And so we have land in Fauquier County We've been approved by the Fauquier County Board of Supervisors. We're super excited about that. We're reviewing schematic designs for a residential program that will house up to 6 women at a time and help them for that 12 to 18 months get on their feet. They'll get constant care and support there, be round-the-clock support. We'll have the substance abuse counseling that they need, the trauma-informed therapy that they need, the case management care that they need. And when they have accomplished that program, we're going to have a half dozen tiny houses around the perimeter of that house. So they're going to be able to get a job and still have the safety net of us in the house to care for them, help them with the therapy, keep on track with the substance abuse support. And then after they finish that, then they're able to launch and become self-sustainable. And that's a life that we'll be able to celebrate. And we're really excited about doing that. And I already talked about the importance of prayer being the core value of everything that we do. That's what sustains us. So if that is something that you do, I beg you to pray for us. So I wanted just to end now talking about how do you respond? What do we do next? So first, be aware of your surroundings and start noticing what's going on around you. If you see something that looks out of place, maybe you're in a coffee shop and it's a beautiful day like this, 80 degrees, but you see someone wearing sweats and sexy high heels and disheveled hair, well, you might have something going on there. And it may just be as simple as, hey, are you okay? And if they say, no, I'm not, then I'm going to, let's see. This is a great resource to provide to them. This is the phone number for the National Human Trafficking Hotline, the 888-373-7888. You can text Be Free to 233-733. Or you can go to polarisproject.org. You can also call your local non-emergency police number and make them aware of what you have found and that the individual needs help. I would start with Polaris because there is so much distrust of the police among these victims that they may not be willing to receive that. So we do not recommend that you insert yourself to be the solution. You've got to be really equipped to be able to navigate that step with them. And even those of us at Reset 180, we go through training to make sure that we're able to care for those who come to us. You can also volunteer with an anti-trafficking organization near you. It doesn't have to be us. If there's another anti-trafficking organization that you're passionate about, you can connect with them. Our website is reset180.com. But that's where you can find us. You can follow us on your social media at Reset180. And I believe on LinkedIn and Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it now, we're Reset180, the lowercase o. You can support our work or another similar organization financially. Nonprofits like Reset180 are only able to do this important work because of support that's provided to us. Many of us do not operate with federal or state grants. We're through community foundations and individual donations and church support. So that helps us respond to the needs that come to us every day. And we just are so thankful to be in this space to be able to care for local survivors of trafficking and to be trusted to be the hands and feet of Jesus to them. So I hope I didn't go over, but I just really thank you all so much for the time that you've given me.
What an incredible presentation. We're going to do a little Q&A
All
here.
right.
So distressing, but at least there is some hope. Let me ask the first question. The big bus they had, $600 an hour, how does that work? For the women, for the customers, how does that work legally?
Logistically?
Yeah, what happens now? Okay.
Right now, what I can tell you as far as, they do have websites set up for these guys to make the appointments, and they have to enter in their photo ID, credit card, and their employer, and all this stuff. I read through that last night. I was really impressed with the hoops they have to jump through, and they actually do it. I was floored. It's like, you were telling them who your employer is. Wow, that's pretty gutsy. And alrighty. So we know that through that there are every profession that you can imagine, and that has been caught up in that. But now what they're going to be doing is going in to try to reach the women and provide services to them. It's going to be really hard because the women are not necessarily going to identify themselves as victims. but they will be reaching out to other organizations. If I were them, I would be talking to the network because they have trained individuals when it comes specifically to illicit massage business trafficking, and they have the appropriate individuals there that will speak Mandarin, that know how to. They have survivors of the IMB trafficking that would be able to come alongside these women and help them. The customers, they're getting ready to see a very lengthy legal process unravel from them. They may, from what I'm seeing, some of them are turning as witnesses to identify more information. So they're being either, if they don't have a plea deal, then they're given immunity in order to get the testimony out of them. But you're going to see some plea deals, and you're going to see some prison time for some of them, depending on how entrenched they are. Some may get a fine and community service, but you're going to see prison time for some of them. Yep. Yes. Yeah, the question was, do we have Caucasian women or is it just Asian women? It depends on the form of trafficking. The illicit massage business trafficking is primarily nearly, I would say 99.9% Asian, but we do see other ethnicities and races, and I mean, everyone has a vulnerability. That's the core of it. So the speaker that I have coming up to our gala next Friday is a lifelong friend of mine, and her daughter was groomed and likely trafficked, and that's a Caucasian family. So and then when you talk about the gangs, you're talking primarily Hispanic girls, but it doesn't have to be. The Young family, that was a Caucasian family. So it's hitting every demographic.
And what about the police? I'm sorry. What about the police? Where you said you had a place in Maryfield, don't you have police that are?
Well, that was a
monitoring
federal
all that?
case, but as far as like being busted by HSI, the Homeland Security folks, through DHS, but Fairfax County is becoming more trained on this. There are only so much resources to go around, and what we are finding is as we're seeing the decline of the number of police officers, there's only so many resources that they have to actually fight this. The gang task force is fully trained, and they're also not just looking at gangs, they're looking at the IMBs. So they are doing some great work, but it's really, they need better training. They need more training, and they need to be freed up to go get this work done. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on, you need the microphone. Oh, wait, Lindsay? Okay, oh, Jody?
You touched on this a little bit, but because I've heard this explanation before, because the I think main question that comes when you talk about these illicit massage is how they're actively in business in Fairfax County, and you guys know about it. You know the actual numbers, and yeah. So can you explain how they continue to
How they operate, how
Yes.
they stay in business?
Yes, exactly.
The county ordinance is weak. That's the basics of it. They have to go through hoops to get in the door to investigate. Yes, the code enforcement can go to the health code folks, health department, but they've only got one person. And if you got 125 of these places, they're not going in. And there's other things that code and health department has to do. They're going to the restaurants and they're going to other places. So there is precious little of them to go around. But our ordinance is very much behind. And something that I'm working with Richmond on to see if they can craft an ordinance that can trickle down. That would be amazing. That if other jurisdictions have something that they can grab a hold of to strengthen the ordinances that they provide. But in Fairfax County, we have a really great bipartisan team that's working on addressing this between Pat Harity, Walter Alcorn here in the Drainsville area, and then Rodney Lusk down in Franconia. And this is something that all three of them are passionate about. Hang on.
How I say the kids because they're young.
Sure.
They move around high school, let's say, come from Maryland, go to Fairfax, go to Loudoun or wherever. The problem is they do not always talk to each other. Has that gotten any better from currently? Sometimes records don't always travel. So when that child who's under 18, we don't have access and cannot find access to it. I'm just
If their
curious.
records don't transfer from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, it's very easy to miss it. During COVID, a lot of kids went missing from the system, so that increased the issue dramatically. But when you have When you have school libraries that will bring in books that validate child sex workers, and the school, you have a teacher said this is not appropriate. She said, well, we're trying to encourage our child sex workers. Like, you just supported human trafficking in your school, and you're allowing that to continue. So until that improves, it's going to continue as well.
Hi there. I'm curious of whether or not the panhandlers are
Yes.
a part of this as well. We've just seen an increase of the panhandlers just in our my little town
Absolutely.
of
That
McLean.
is another form of trafficking. They'll use the panhandling and begging, and they're paying it up to somebody else in many cases. Absolutely. That was a good catch. Thank you. I mean, and honestly, when I talked about the 4 types of trafficking, those are the predominant ones that we see here. There's so much more, so many other ways that people can be exploited. And it's not necessarily sexually, but just to be exploited and manipulated just for someone else's financial gain. Absolutely.
Is there any way that the Republican women's clubs can help you?
Volunteer. Volunteer support. On the Reset 180 website, under our Get Involved tab, we have a place to identify ways to volunteer and support. Helping us get out there just with the message that you're hearing right now to create more awareness is another way. Any group, we love any group just to have us come out. We've got a great volunteer speakers bureau that can do this. Financial support is huge because it helps us continue this messaging, continue the support for our survivors. So all of that is extremely supportive and helpful. But yeah, just allowing us, giving us a platform to speak is very, very supportive.
What about, you said you go to these places, these massage places with just 2 people?
With 3.
Or
No more,
3.
no less than 3.
Because I would think that would, you're outside, but that would still be so dangerous for you all.
Honestly, we've been doing it since 2019 and haven't had a single problem. And since we're out in the open, there's really nothing they're going to do to us. The only thing that has happened, it was recently, was, and we've never had this happen before. We're actually kind of excited about it. Okay, that was a weird way to put it. The women came out. We can't get past the mama son at the front desk to get to the women in the back. That's how we started the disruption work. We were trying to be providing services to the women in the places, and we couldn't get past the mama son. So now we went to this place out in Chantilly, and they weren't happy we were there. They came out and talked about how they're legitimate. We're like, no, you're not. We did our homework first. And they were saying, well, you're hurting our business. But it was like all 3 of the women came out, 2 women that worked there in the mama san, and their hands on their hips and puffing up and kind of like peacocking to make themselves look bigger and threatening, kind of like a cat with a hair all standing up on his back. And we're like, this has never happened. And so we're like, we're going to keep coming back here. And now we're talking to them more. We're bringing translators out with us, and we're able to start developing a relationship with these women and saying, we care about you. What you're doing hurts yourself. And so we just keep coming back and like, we're working with local churches, and we just want to show you that we care about you. So that has been really cool. But that first night, they called the guy. Remember, I talked about how they have a guy escorting them. Had the guy come. He parked in front of the place, and we're like, "Oh, this is interesting." But honestly, we've never felt unsafe doing this. And the women said, "We're going to call the police." We're like, "Please do. Please do." And we're like, "We want you to feel safe. If that makes you feel safer, please do call the police. If you want to call 911, go for it." And we've had places call 911, call the police on us before, and they're like, "Okay, can you move back away from the sidewalk?" We're like, "Yeah, sure." But we're in a public place. We're not in front of the door. We don't keep someone from going. If they want to go in, they can go in. We're not gonna stop them, but we will ask for a conversation with them. So that's a great question. Yeah.
I have a question. So, as well, I'm not a parent, but for the parents here, what are some ways that they could help mitigate the risk with their children or reduce the risks of them falling into this? Because I know that you mentioned the family of, I believe, a high school girl who ended up falling into this, and what are some ways that you can help mitigate that as a parent?
That's a great question, and I will tell you, Susan Young works with Anti-Trafficking International. It used to be called Just Ask, and she runs a full parent program over there. And so she's taken what's happened to her and is using it as a resource to provide to other families, but what to look out for. And the speaker that I have coming to the gala, like I said, she's a lifelong friend of mine. She's telling me her story, what's going on, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is clockwork. That what happened to her. I'm hearing shades of it from Susan Young's story. So many similarities, and things like just the changing of behavior and attitudes. So being aware of that. So when you start seeing your child change, nip it in the bud. Start saying, what's happened? What's wrong? Are you okay? Is there someone you would like to talk to? And you're, as a mom, well, my kids are all in college now, so I'm not the cool person to talk to about stuff right now. But if there's another person in their life that they feel safe talking to, would you like to talk to Aunt so-and-so or your youth group leader or someone else that they feel safe talking to? Recommend it. The schools aren't necessarily going to catch it, but you can definitely try that route. But just keep getting into your kids' business. They're going to hate you for it at first, but they'll love you for it later. Keep on top of their social media and start drilling into their phones. That's where all this stuff is happening. Is they're getting them through their phones if they're not catching them at a when they're out by themselves with their friend groups, places like that. But identify what they're getting to. Look for things that look like a phone or calculator, because it's going to be some kind of chat app behind it. I mean, pull it up. If it comes up as a phone, then you're all good. But if you click the phone button on their phone and something else comes up, you've just found how that trafficker or the predator is getting to your child. But they're going to use some other kind of devices like that. Look at Discord, look at WeChat, I believe is another, Kick. Live chat is another, the Cash App they use for the transactions. But there are ways to catch that one. Yeah, Rosie.
This is fascinating. Thank you so very much.
Sure.
My question is specifically about the high schools in Fairfax County and the middle schools.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a huge problem, and everybody knows it, but what is being done about it, and, you know, what can be done about it?
The sad thing is, I mean, there is curriculum in the schools right now, but the staff aren't trained up on how to recognize trafficking. They're not trained up on what to do when they do find trafficking. The SROs, quite honestly, in many cases, don't have appropriate training on how to mitigate it if they do find it. And it's one SRO in that school, and you've got a gang of activity going on there. He's no match for that gang. So you need to start bringing in more resources into the schools to attack it. I do know that the schools know what's going on, but getting any insight as to the depth and breadth of it, it's not going to happen easily. So it comes through parents identifying it and honestly blowing it up, making a big stink about it. And that way, the more that we hear, the more we're able to respond, the more police are aware, because you're going to find it's going to get buried because it just doesn't look good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
What incredible work you're doing. I mean, I didn't know this. I mean, this is so distressing, but then the hope at the end, it's very, very encouraging. And you're a strong, courageous lady, and you're going to like our limited edition coffee mug
I do like it.
with her famous saying. This is Clare Boothe Luce. Want to read it?
Courage is the ladder on which all the other virtues move.
Right. You can know all this stuff, but if you don't do something about it, you don't have the courage, and you do have the courage.
Thank you. I love the plum.
I want to give you my book. It's a little different from this, but there's also similarities. You know, how to raise a conservative daughter, social media, phones, watching the Friends, and most important of all, the faith and understanding how what special, unique person God has made you, as well as philosophically understanding that our rights come from God, not from government. So give you a copy of that, and thank you so much for being with us and sharing all that. It's shocking, but hopeful. And hope you'll all join us right next door for some lunch.